Hashem, the Daf Yomi for Shabbos Kodesh, which we're recording on Friday, is Avodah Zarah Daf Gimel. And we're going to start on the bottom of Beis Amud Beis, where the nations of the world said to Hashem, "Why are you giving us a harsh judgment when the Jewish people only accepted the Torah because you forced them to accept the Torah by placing a mountain over them like a kigigit?" And so for that reason, they had no choice. You placed a mountain over them like a barrel. Otherwise, they wouldn't have accepted it. So as it says, basically 7 lines from the bottom. This is what they say to God. The nations of the world say to God. What's the big deal that the Jewish people accepted the Torah? What did you force us to accept the Torah like you forced the Jewish people? You placed a mountain over their heads. That's why the only reason why the Jewish people accept the Torah is because you forced them. As it says, God placed a mountain over the Jewish people, and he said, "If you accept the Torah, good. Otherwise, this will be your burial spot." So immediately God said to the nations of the world, Harishonos Yashmianu. God said to the nations of the world, the earlier teachings or the earlier commandments will inform us that this is a pasuk from Isaiah. It means to say that we'll prove it from the way you didn't keep that which you were supposed to keep. God says to the 7 nations. Sheva mitzvah shekibaltem, the 7 mitzvahs which you were required to do. Heichan kiyamtim, did you uphold them? We know them dilo kimum. How do we know that the nations of the world did not really keep the seven commandments that they were obligated to? What are the 7 commandments? Do not kill, do not commit adultery, do not worship idolatry, and also not to eat a limb, Aver Menachai, not to eat limb from a living animal, to set up a court system, not to steal, and not to curse God's name. So we're on the bottom of 2b of Avodah Zarah. So the Gemara says, how do we know they didn't keep them? Titani Rav Yosef Amad Vayimoded Eretz Rav Ayater Gayim. God stood up and measured out the land. He saw and he dispersed the nations. Mara, what did God see? He saw that they didn't keep the 7 Noahide laws. Once they didn't uphold them, Amar v'tiran. He stood up, and not that he dispersed them, but he allowed them. He said that they're no longer prohibited, and he released them from their obligation. So I asked the Gemara, Itguri means to say, what does it mean? They get a reward because they didn't keep the commandments. They were permitted to do them. The sinner is being rewarded. So no, it's teaching us that even though they don't fulfill them, even though they fulfill them, once they didn't keep them, God said, you're released from them, meaning to say you're no longer obligated. It means you're no longer getting a reward. So meaning to say that even though they were no longer commanded, there means that they no longer get the reward for keeping them. But with respect to the punishment, they're still liable for the punishments, like they get the worst of it. Mara says, Velo, is it really the case that they don't get reward? How do we know if there's an idolater who engages in Torah studies like a high priest? A man does these and lives. It means any person, meaning to say, the Talmud tells us, what do you mean the idolaters don't get reward for doing the 7 Noahide laws? Didn't we just say in the Brisa that any idolater who keeps the laws will be like a Kohen Gadol? So by the way, Tosfos says that this refers to the 7 Noahide laws, because there's other, we learned in Sanhedrin that an idolater is not supposed to study Torah. So this is referring to an idolater who studies the laws related to the 7 Noahide laws, which, by the way, are overarching categories, really referring to the whole Torah. But if he keeps the 7 Noahide laws and studies them, he's like a high priest, meaning a non-Jew does not need to be Jewish in order to get to heaven. He just needs to keep the 7 Noahide laws. So to tell us, so Elu Amarcha to teach us, the Gemara's answer is She'em Mekabel Lehem Schar K'mitzvah v'oseh. They don't get reward like somebody who was commanded and does it. El Kamin She'enim Mitzvah v'oseh. They get a lesser reward like somebody who was not commanded. The Amar Rabbi Chanina Gadol Mitzvah v'oseh Yoser Mi She'enim Mitzvah v'oseh. Greater is the one who is not commanded. Greater is the reward of one who's commanded to do it than the reward of somebody who is not commanded to do it. So, okay, so then the Gemara says, so this is what the idolaters ended up saying to God. The Jews who accepted the Torah, where do they keep it? Meaning to say, how do you know the Jews kept it? You're saying we didn't keep it, but do the Jews keep it? He says, I testify that they kept the whole Torah. So the idolater said to God, is there any father who's allowed to testify for his son? A father can't testify in his son. He's not kosher witness. That says, B'ni B'chor Yisrael, because it says, my son, the firstborn Israel. So how can you testify on behalf of the Jewish people? He said, so God says, okay, heaven and earth will testify that the Jewish people kept the Torah. No, and he said, no, heavens and earth can't testify because they're no Gea Be'edus. They're touching the testimony, meaning to say that they have an interest in it. If you don't keep my covenant day and night, I will not keep the laws of heaven, meaning to say that the existence of heaven and earth is depends upon the Jewish people keeping the mitzvos. So how can the heaven and earth testify? So Gemara says, and how do we know this? God made a covenant with the creation of the world, and he said, if the Jewish people accept my Torah, it's all well and good. Otherwise, I'll return you back. I'll return the whole world to Tohu Vavohu. So, and what do we do from the fact that the verse says, Mishamayim Hishmata? What do we do from the fact that it states, Mishamayim Hishmata Din Eretz Yara V'Shakta? From heaven you made judgment, meaning to say, from the heaven you made the judgment heard, and the earth became afraid and grew calm. Im Yara Lama Shakta, if it's afraid, why did it grow calm? Im Shakta Lama Yara, if it grew calm, why did it become afraid? Al B'Tchila Yara, at first the earth, before B'nai Yisrael accepted the Torah, the earth was afraid. It was so Shakta, and the end it grew calm. So the whole existence of the world is dependent upon the Jewish people keeping the Torah. So you can't bring a witnesses from the heaven and the earth. So Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Michem Yavo V'Ya'idu Bahen Israel. He says, from amongst you, the witnesses will come and testify among the Jewish people, Shekimu Es Torah Kula. So from amongst you, they'll come and testify that the Jewish people kept the whole Torah. Nimrod will come and testify that Avram did not worship idolatry. Lavan will come and testify that Jacob did not steal. A wife of Potiphar will come and testify about Joseph that he didn't sin with adultery. Nebuchadnezzar will come and testify about Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They didn't bow down to the idols. Daniel Daryavesh will come and testify in Daniel that he did not nullify the prayers. He didn't miss a prayer. Yavo Bildad Ashuchi, Mitzofar Namati, the Eliphaz Tumani, Yedu Bahem Yisrael Shekimus Kol Torah Kula. They'll testify that Jewish people kept the whole Torah, these three friends of Job. Shenemar, as it states, Yitnu Eidam v'Yitzdaku, let them bring their witnesses and they'll be vindicated. So they'll come and testify that the Jewish people kept the whole Torah. They were just friends of Job. And they were prophets. The Gemara Bava Basra states that they were all three were Nevi'im. And they're going to come and testify. So the nations then say, give us the Torah anew so we can accept it. Fools, whoever worked hard on Friday, he gets to eat on Shabbos. If you didn't work hard on Friday, how are you going to eat on Shabbos? Nevertheless, mitzvah kawash yeshli, I have an easy mitzvah, the sukkah shema, and then this is the mitzvah of sukkah, living in a sukkah. Go and live in the sukkah. How can you say that Hashem is going to give the nations one more chance? Meaning to say, God says, I'm going to give you the commandments to do today. Meaning today is the commandments, and not in the world to come. Today to do them, and today you won't receive the rewards. So how can they get a mitzvah in the Olam Haba? Because Hashem gives him this chance, because Hashem does not want to seek an excuse with his creations. He wants to give them more ways to be successful. Why is the mitzvah of sukkah called an easy mitzvah? Because it doesn't involve, you don't have to lose a lot of money. You just put up an easy stach, and that's it. So each of the idolaters is going to go and put a sukkah on his roof. And Hashem is going to make it very hot. He's going to take out the sun. It's going to make it so hot. Each one is going to kick the sukkah and leave. As it states, let's cut their cords and cast off their ropes. Makdir is God going to really pierce them with the heat of the sun. God doesn't want to give excuses to his nations. So, Mishum Yisrael Nami Zimne, because the Jews also have the same problem. Because sometimes it becomes very cold, very hot in by Sukkot time. Avodah Zarah, and they have this discomfort. But what's the problem? They're mitzvah, they're in distress. Of course, they don't have to sit in the sukkah. They're in distress. The Gemara says, no. Yeah, they're exempt, but they shouldn't have kicked the sukkah. God's immediately going to sit and laugh at them. It says, Yoshev b'shamayim Yitzchak. This is the only day that God is going to laugh. Some teach that this teaching of Rabbi Yitzchak was said on the following verse. In the future, all the idolaters will come and convert. Are we allowed to accept them when they come? In the time of the Mashiach, we're not allowed to accept the converts. Because we suspect they only want to join the Jewish people because the Jewish people are sovereign then. Also, during the time of David and Solomon, they didn't accept it. But the nations will be wanting to convert. They'll put the tefillin on their heads. Tefillin on their arms. They'll put the tzitzis on the mezuzah. Once they see the war coming of Gog and Magog, so the nations will say to Gog and Magog, why are you here? They will say, we came to wage war against God and his anointed one. Why do nations gather and the regimes talk in vain? mitzvah. So each one of them, when they hear this, will remove his mitzvah and go on. Shenemar ninatkas mosremo. Cut their cords and go on. V'akadosh Baruch Hu yoshi misachik. God will sit in heaven and laugh. Yoshi b'shamayim yitzlach. As it states, he who sits in heaven will laugh. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Ein lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu tzlok el osa yom avad. And that was the only day that God laughed. Is that really the case? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav Shtayim Esrei Shos Havei Hayom. Is it really the case that that's the only time of day that God? That's the only time God laughed? But says Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Rav, there were 12 hours in each day. Shalosh Harishonos HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yoshev Osik b'Torah. The first three he sits and engages in Torah study. Shniyot, the second three, Yoshev Adanas Kolam Kul. He judges the whole world. Once he sees that the world is deserving to be destroyed, he gets up from judgment and sits on mercy. Shlish the third hour, the third 3 hour period, he sits and judges the whole and sustains the whole world. Mikarne Re'im, Beitze Kinim, from the horns of the Re'im till the eggs of the lice. Revius, the fourth hour, the fourth 3 hour period, Yoshefu Mesachik and Leviathan. He goes and he plays with the Leviathan. It says Leviathan Zeh Yatzar Tosachek Bo. He goes and plays with the Leviathan, as it says, this Leviathan you created to play with. Amar Rav Yitzchak and Amar Rav Nachman and Yitzchak, so he sees playing with it. In Briosav Mesachik, Va'al Briosav Ena Mesachik O Yosem Avad. No, he laughs with his creatures, but he doesn't laugh at his creatures, except for that one time. Amar Rav Acha Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Miyom Shachar Beis HaMikdash Ein Tzchok LaKadosh Baruch Hu. From the day that the temple was destroyed, God stopped laughing. How do we know that? Maybe it says God called that day to be a day of crying and eulogizing and boldness. So the Gemara says, maybe it's just that day. Because it says in means they have to remember Jerusalem. Maybe he doesn't forget it, but he doesn't necessarily laugh. I've kept silent, I've been still, I have restrained myself. So therefore he stops laughing. Baravios my Avid. So if there's nothing, so if there's no laughter anymore, we just said that during the fourth 3 hour period, God does laugh with them. So what's he doing? God sits and teaches young Torah children. Rashi says this refers to the Torah children who died while they're young. Whom shall one teach Torah? Whom shall one teach knowledge? To whom does one explain a message? To those weaned from their mother's milk. To whom does God teach? To the one who was weaned from the milk and from the breasts. So before the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, who taught these kids Torah? Metatron. Some say it was the angel Metatron. If you say God did both, he did both. He was rejoicing and teaching. What does God do at night? He repeats the same schedule as a day. He rides on his fast cherub and flies amongst the 18,000 worlds. It says God's entourage is myriads, thousands of angels. They are not. It's 22,000 minus 18,000. It's minus 2,000. 20,000 minus 2,000. Maybe he listens to the songs from the Chayos. As it says, Shenemar Yomam Yitzaveh Hashem Chasto B'Layla Shiro Imi. Whoever stops studying Torah engages in idle chatter. They feed him long burning coals. Shenemar HaKodfim Maluach Alei Sichem. The Shorish Resamim Lachmam. Amar Reish Lakish kol osik b'Torah laila Kadosh Baruch Hu Moshe chol avchut shel chesed b'yom. Whoever engages in Torah study at night, God will spread upon him the string of kindness during the day, as it says, Yoma mitzava Hashem chasto u'b'layla shiro imi. Ma'atam Yoma mitzava Hashem chasto. What's the reason why Hashem will command His kindness during the day? Mishum b'layla shiro, because in the night His song of Torah is with me. Mikada Amri, alternatively, Amar Reish Lakish kol osik b'Torah b'olam hazeh. Whoever engaged in Torah study in this world, Adom el, which is likened to night, God will endow him with charm in the world to come. Adom el, which is likened to the day, as it states, Yoma mitzava Hashem chasto. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Ma'idach Siv Vatasa Adam Kidgei Ayam Karemes Lo Moshalbo. What does it mean when it says, "And may man like the fish of the sea, like creeping things without a ruler"? Why are people compared to the sea, to the fish of the sea? To tell you, just like fish, once they go up to dry land, they immediately die. So too, a person, when we separate from Torah mitzvahs, they immediately die. Alternatively, just like fish of the sea, and once, just like fish of the sea, as soon as it shines, they perish. So too, person, as soon as the sun shines upon them, they perish. Some say in this world, some say the world to come. Who says, everything is in the hands of heaven, except for cold and heat. As it says, and some say in the world to come, there's no hell in the world to come, there's just the sun. God will take out the sun and make it blaze brightly. And those who are righteous will be healed, and those who are wicked will be punished. And that this is the idea that heaven and hell are the same thing. It's just our perspective. Heaven and hell could be a beautiful Gemara shir. For one person, that's heaven. The other, that's hell. All right, we'll stop here. Shekayach to everybody.